everyone, welcome back to Expanding the Zone. I'm Shane Combs, joined here by my brother Matt, as always, and I think we really got a great show for you here. Show 13, we're talking a little old school versus new school, and Matt, I guess the question early on is going to be, is it out with the old and in with the new, or are we going to kind of say, let's get back to our roots, because we used to do that pretty well. I've heard a lot of people say, just because we used to do it different doesn't mean we didn't do it correct. And it's really been in show prep, it's really been a lot of fun for me to kind of go back and look at these particular things. Again, appreciate all of you listening to us out there on wherever you get your podcast, on your apps there, be it Spotify or iHeart, iTunes, and of course you joining us here on our YouTube channel, SVC Sports Zone. Shane, if you want a chance to watch the show, you certainly can do that, but just appreciate all the early support through our first 12 shows. So Matt, as I welcome you to the show, I guess I start to always look for why this show now, and I've looked at things like the load management, and as they're coming back to the NBA bubble, and they've talked about the MLB pitchers coming back, and kind of they're in spring training, then they're out forever, now they're coming back. Does there need to be an innings, management load, all these different things. And I guess that's kind of what got me thinking about some of these things. But when I look down through my list, I see toughness, physical, mental, competitiveness, athleticism. We're going to talk sports IQ. We're going to talk coachability. We're going to talk media attention. We're going to cover it from really every angle. I guess what I would ask you to answer maybe here first is just your thoughts when you look at this, adjusting throughout your career in terms of the old school, which I guess for us now at our age is back when we played and before, compared to the new school here in terms of kind of the age we're coaching in and that we hope to continue to coach in.
Yeah, I think as we go through these, what's interesting is you're going to find that some of the things, some of the changes over the years, we probably do it better now. Some we probably don't. Some we could probably afford to maybe take a look how we used to do it. And you said, as you talk old versus new, you made the comment just now, just because we did it different doesn't mean we did it wrong. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the flip side of that is just because it's the way we've always done it doesn't necessarily make it the right way to do it either. So,
right.
I think there is some truth to, as we've gained knowledge in certain areas over the years and made changes, we've probably made them for the better, but we probably have some areas too, man. It'd be nice to take a step back and go back into the day and maybe do things a little bit more like we did them back then. So it ought to be some interesting discussion points.
Well, Matt, I want to talk with something, a word that gets thrown around in sports quite a bit is toughness. And I thought it was a great place to start because I think as we get to know our athletes, I think we would agree in leadership and coaching, which is something we really focus and kind of bring things back to the high school game here. Toughness is kind of a funny thing. Toughness doesn't always mean up in your face fighting different things. I think toughness sometimes means, coming over off the midline and taking a charge or having the discipline to wait that extra second to help a teammate come open in the timing of a play or not reacting in an emotional situation in a third strike call or a penalty in football or a foul call in basketball or whatever it may be. And I guess I look at toughness here first. I want to look at it from the physical side. When we, in the old day, I don't know that we were any tougher. I think in some ways we didn't know any better. So I want to start on that aspect first. I know I played in a high school basketball game one time against a rival where I had two of my teammates basically, one getting wrapped up going through three jerseys and another one falling straight on his head. And, both of them, just relentlessly coming back, playing. And I can remember now looking back with the knowledge I have now, the next night in the game after, those guys having a little bit of the effects and different things. And it wasn't that anyone made poor decisions or it was a time where we just didn't have the same protocol or difference. Nowadays, obviously, those two would have never returned from the get-go. So do you follow what I'm saying there? And what would you add to the physical toughness in terms of, I don't know if it's fair to say older guys were quote unquote tougher. I think that we probably have become a little bit more educated. And that's probably a good thing, but there might be some negatives to it as well. Just your thoughts when you think of toughness comparing to when you played compared to the kids you coach.
I think as we talk tonight, Shayne, one of the words that's going to pop up a few times, or at least it did as I made my notes, was knowledge. Like the knowledge that we've gained over the years in certain areas has been the cause of us making changes. And when it comes to the major injuries, the one thing over the years we've noticed a lot as coaches is we treat the major stuff a lot more carefully now, which I think is probably one of the good changes. Okay, the head injuries, right? The cardiac stuff, like making ourselves more knowledgeable as it pertains to sudden cardiac arrest situations or anything with rapid heartbeats. I mean, you're talking life-changing type of injuries here, or life-changing moments that could occur when we're talking about the head, the heart, anything like that. I think that it's the knowledge that we've gained, because like you said, when we played, it wasn't that our coaches didn't care about us or whatever. They didn't know any better. Hey, you got your bell rung, you got dinged, you kept playing. And we know better than that now, right? We know what that can lead to now. So I think the knowledge has been a good thing in terms of being able to watch for the athlete's help. Now, like most things in our society, we take something good and we overdo it at times, and I think there's situations now where we take injuries that aren't really injuries, quite honestly, maybe little hurts here and there, and we blow them up into bigger things that it's like we tell our guys, you're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you're going to play a sport. I mean, you're not going to feel good. If in basketball, high school basketball, we have 70 practices, about 50 of them, you're going to kind of feel like, I could take it or leave it today. I don't feel great. I'm not 100%. I'm dinged up a little bit. I got a little bit of a cold. Whatever. How far do we take some things like that? Also, the thing that's confusing for coaches sometimes is how we treat injuries. I laugh. I had an ankle injury in college, Shayne, and as soon as I did it was in practice, I thought, oh man, I'm going to be out for a few days. This was bad, man. This hurts. And I was at a college where their sports medicine was their number one major at this college, and they took me in and they put my foot in ice water for I don't know, for a period of time. I mean, I'm talking cold enough where it was really uncomfortable. Pull that thing out, put it in hot water, hot enough where it was uncomfortable. Back to cold, back to hot, back to cold. And I remember thinking, this is strange, but the next day I couldn't believe it, man, how good I felt after what I thought was a really bad ankle injury. I brought that up to one of our trainers a few years ago, and I said, here's what they did back in the early 90s when I was in college. Why is that something they do now? Oh no, we don't do that now. We ice it, we do this, we do that. So in her mind, the knowledge had made her, change. My thing is, has the ankle evolved, to where it worked in the early 90s and it doesn't work now? You know what I mean? So, but I think sometimes, let's face it, kids get hurt now. And if you go to a family doctor or you go to train, let's just sit him out 2 weeks. It's very easy in today's society we have, as medical people, have to cover their butts all the time, right? Oh, we don't want to get ourselves in trouble. Just sit him out 2 weeks. Take 2 weeks off. Well, that's not necessarily what the idea of sports medicine is. You're trying to get athletes returned to play as quickly as possible. So I guess to make a long answer kind of short here, the knowledge has helped us in the major stuff. It's probably caused us to be overprotective with the minor stuff.
Well, I think that's a great point, because I think I'll just stay with your analogy there of the ankle. That's a very common injury, and I think what happens is sometimes to make it as easy as possible is you sprain your ankle, right?
Right.
Where in today's time, like you said, doctors are a little bit more cautious. How quickly do I throw it back out there? I don't think the sprained ankle will lead to something, but what if they happen to have an injury to the leg or the knee, or am I going to get linked back to that?
Right.
I'll have kids come back to me saying things like, I had a partial stretch or partial tear of the ligaments. Well, you sprained your ankle. That's what a sprain is. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
by definition, that's what a sprain is. So, nowadays it's, they're handing out these big gray boots. You'll see kids walking in
Right.
all over the place now, and that's fine. I mean, whatever. But like you said, I think a lot of times there are certain injuries that maybe we have gone to the other extreme based on how important the head and the heart and some of those other things can be. I think that's a great part of it. Now, a lot of times when you go through these different toughness discussions, it goes over to a side of mental. And your mental toughness a lot of times is an interesting thing to me, because I think obviously we played in a time, and we'll kind of touch on this in coaching and leadership later, where it was probably more culturally accepted for a coach to jump on you in terms of a little bit more today what would almost be considered verbal abuse, where back then it just was looked at as coaching. They would be a little bit more grab the face mask, a little bit more nose to nose, a little bit more demonstrative, in terms of almost like in today's time, maybe being considered, showing someone up. I guess I have 2 or 3 points I want to make here, and then I want to make a link to something into our next topic, but I guess I'll stop there and ask you, when I turn from physical over to the mental toughness, what are your thoughts there in terms of the adjustment over the last, say, 20, 30 years?
I think as a whole, and when we talk about this tonight, we're just going to call them like we see them, right? I think as a whole, kids today are not as what I would consider as mentally tough as they were in the past. And I think I love the old kids are different nowadays. That's always kind of struck me funny, because kids aren't different. I mean, kids are born the same way.
Right.
I think they're raised different, both at home and in school. And I think because of that, they're a little bit, they act different, but they're not by themselves different. I mean, the kids today are no different than we were. It's just the environment they grow up in. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but I think that's kind of what I think shapes kids' attitudes or views. Think about it this way: if you're going to look at the mental toughness of kids, I think you have to consider the 2 places they spend the vast majority of their time, which is at home and at school, right? I mean, if you think about kids growing up, the vast majority of their time is taken up in those 2 places. So it's how they're being raised, and it's how they're being disciplined at school. And I think those 2 places have changed a whole lot over the last couple decades. And I think because of that, the way kids take criticism, the way they handle adversity has changed, because I think the way they're criticized or the way they're disciplined at home is different, and the way they're criticized constructively or otherwise and disciplined at school is different. And because of that, as coaches, when we have them for our 2 hours a day out of 24, we have to coach them differently, or we have to lead them differently to an extent, because of sort of the society they've grown up in. I mean, I see it with my own kids. Oh, you're yelling at me. Well, I wasn't yelling at you. I gave you some criticism, some what I thought was constructive criticism, and you took it personally. I mean, it's called parenting. I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to raise you. But they've grown up in a society where, I'm just going to be honest, everybody's supposed to talk to you like this. Now, listen, buddy, let me give you a suggestion here. When we were younger, it was like, hey, listen, man, you're going to do it this way or else.
Well, why? Well, because I said so.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a different time that way. So as leaders, okay,
right,
we can bang our head against the wall and fight it, or we can adjust and understand that, hey, you get these kids for 2 hours a day. The other 22 hours, they're being influenced at home, or they're being influenced at school in environments where people aren't being overly critical or over demanding of them in a lot of situations. I think the level of demand, the level of accountability has went way down. And the way kids take criticism or handle adversities, quite frankly, just not quite as good as it used to be.
Well, I think that leads me to another topic of coachability. When I talk about maybe kids handling certain things or handling criticism, I think honestly, I think even adults that grew up in those times, I see them a little bit more sensitive to maybe their boss or their coworker pushing them or challenging them in a certain way. Or I think it's come across our culture. And again, I use the word acceptable. What was once acceptable might not be quite as acceptable in today's workplace or today's practice floor or practice field or just practice arena. You know, when I look at coachability, Matt, I think players have always been difficult to coach. You know what I'm saying? And there's always been egos involved. I was
Sure.
just watching the greatest movie ever made the other day, Hoosiers. And you think about Ray, right? All Norm Bedell wanted him to do is pass the ball 4 times, and he couldn't even make it to the third quarter of the first game, right? Remember the guys over on the side, shoot the ball, Ray, shoot the ball. You know,
Well, hey, my teammates would tell you I wouldn't have made it past halfway through the first quarter if I had to pass 4 times.
but my point is, you know, there's always been those guys or those gals that have been very difficult to coach from an ego or managing egos or just getting everybody on the same page or whatever it is. I don't know that part of it's changed. I think from a coachability standpoint, you still have players that are sponges. You still have players that are always going to question you a little bit, even if they don't do so outwardly. The kind of inside they're kind of, I wonder why we're doing this. And at the end of the day, coaching's still kind of coaching. And I think it's kind of where the great leaders have been able to adjust. When I see these guys that have been able to do it, the guys or the ladies that have been able to do it over a 2-3 decade period have obviously adjusted to different types of situations and culture and so forth, where others maybe just no fault of their own, they've even admitted just I can't do that anymore, and they kind of step away. But don't you think, in terms of the athletes, in terms of coachability, even though it might be done in a different way, there's always been players that have been difficult to coach?
There's no question about that, and I think the trick is, though, how do you handle that now compared to how you used to handle it?
Right.
I think kids used to, and I've even had older coaches tell me this. Kids used to do what the coach told them without questioning it, and because basically, even if they didn't agree with it, they were sort of raised that way. Like, you don't question adults, you do what you're supposed to do, you do what you're told to do, even if you don't agree with it.
Right.
We don't live in that society anymore. Like, let's go back. Let me go back just for a second, Shayne,
Sure.
to the whole parenting issue and the school issue. So you take parenting. There's a fine line in parenting between, I think, protecting your kids based on the knowledge we talked about earlier, right? We've gotten smarter, we understand things, and then basically doing things for your kids to the point where they don't have to have any level of accountability. Like, let me give you a couple examples. I heard somebody one time making fun of parents who make their kids wear helmets to ride bicycles. Well, we didn't. I mean, they're raised in a bunch of wussies. You know, we didn't wear helmets to ride bicycles. Well, our knowledge tells us now that maybe that's a good idea. You know, my mom carried me in her lap while she drove the car too, because we didn't have seat belts. Is that a good idea? You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure now that if I said, hey, when my kid was born, we just didn't have a car seat. We just carried him home in our lap. You know, people will be ready to throw me in jail, right? Why? Knowledge. We understand now that that's not a good idea, that we have safety measures now that protect us. So is making your kid wear a helmet causing him to be a wuss? Well, no, I just think that it's a way to protect your kids. Now, let's take stuff to the other extreme, though, and I see this too. And I know all elementary age parents of elementary age kids will know what I'm talking about here, right? You have these projects. This always kills me. Around the holidays, especially, you'll have a project. As you get older, science fair projects, whatever, and you'll walk through the hallways of these schools, and you'll see these elaborate projects that supposedly a first grader did.
Some pretty intelligent first graders.
Oh yeah, like, oh, this first grader did this huge poster board with all this beautiful artwork and all this stuff. Well, no, the parents did it for them. Why? Because they don't want their kid to fail. They don't want their kid to have to look up and say, oh, Johnny's picture was better than mine. It's keeping up with the Joneses. It's making your kid feel good. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've walked into people's houses before, and they'll say, oh, I'm just finishing up Johnny's science fair project for him. You know, I mean, I'm like, come on, man. I mean, you know, why not allow your kid to do it and allow your kid to know the joy of success, or, hey, I guess the frustration or the letdown of failure, whatever. Learn those valuable lessons. I don't think those are being learned at home. So as we get back to coachability, my point to all this is you have to understand that the kids you're coaching now are at times probably going to question you. Even if they don't do it out loud, they're doing it behind closed doors. You need to get out ahead of that. I think kids today need to be told why. When we run a drill or we do something in practice.
Well, it goes back to what I said before. The answer, I was kind of joking earlier, but in all honesty, the answer used to be because I said so, where
Yes.
now your kind of point is that you got to explain it.
And even though a kid may not have guts enough or disrespect enough to just say, why are we doing this crap? You know, they're thinking it in their mind,
Right.
and it's a distraction. So you have to, as a coach, say, hey guys, let's get in, 5-ball shooting drill or whatever you want to say. Here's why we do this drill, fellas. We learn this, 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 and this from this drill. Now you've answered that question and kids can focus a little better. Again, part of being a leader, and leaders don't want to admit this sometimes because we just want to be stubborn and say, hey, you're going to do it because I said. Leadership is evolving and changing, and you're constantly trying to figure out ways to lead, ways I can get you from here to there. Okay, that's the whole idea of leadership and coaching. And stubbornness doesn't really play a role in that. You've constantly got to look at, who am I dealing with? What type of kid am I dealing with here? Because ultimately, Shayne, I still feel like this. I still feel like kids today, they want to win just as badly. They want to be successful just as badly as we did or any other generation did. Now, I grant you, are they as competitive in every situation as you'd want them to be? I don't know, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that some. But I still say deep down, they want to win. They want to do something to please you. They want to make the right play. That's the one common thread that's the same now as it was before.
Well, you said some words there. I was taking some different notes and words that started to come to my mind for leadership and coaching, and being able to adjust, being flexible, versatile, right. Adaptation. I got to thinking, Matt, like take a principal, for example. I know just in our building, as my mind starts to kind of go through our building, we're a pretty small school. You might be leading a 23-year-old, a 33-year-old, a 43-year-old, a 53-year-old. You might even have people out of retirement still closer to 60. So right. Imagine that dynamic. If you're in charge of a staff in any workplace of, say, 15, 20, 25, 30 people, just in something that small, again, you may be dealing with a 30, 40, 50-year age gap in terms of that's going to be very dynamic in terms of how you sell your vision or you paint the picture of success to that particular clientele. I think I see it a lot of times in the classroom. I see it. I'm trying to work with middle school kids all day in the classroom, and then I'm trying to deal with high school kids out on the baseball field or on the basketball court. And even that's a dynamic in terms of how they have perspective on life. So I think that's a great point. I wanted to tie back. All of that stuff was kind of on that mental side as I come down through. I want to get. I'm going to zigzag back and forth on you here. I want to go back to something on the physical side and talk about kids being a little bit more athletic today. It's kind of the thing out there. I think there's a lot of different reasons. I'll let you talk about. Maybe you could tie in nutrition. I know you were an outstanding player in high school, and I wondered just how much you were introduced to the weight room there, say 25, 30 years ago. I know I played on some really good teams, and I'll be honest, I didn't do a lot of weight training. Where in today's time, there's personal trainers and there's different things. I even think, Matt, that there's a parent commitment because of money. It used to be, I don't know, you have to get out there and lift some weights, or you have to get out there and play if you want to be good, where now parents are paying monthly payments to these workout places and these individual instructors. And, hey, I'm paying good money. You better be there on time. You better work hard. You better pay attention. We've got a lot invested in this. So I think there's a parent commitment. But I don't know. I mean, athletes have obviously evolved when you look at different lineups and you look at size of kids and just human beings in general. What's your take in terms of athleticism before I kind of tie in one or two other things that I want you to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue that the athletes today are just bigger and faster and stronger, and I think it comes down again to the knowledge. I go back to that. We understand now how to improve our bodies, nutrition, weight training. Like you said, even when we were growing up. I mean, and when I was in high school and even college, okay, in the early 90s, the weight training was not really there. I mean, it was very minimal in the sport of basketball.
Right.
I'm sure, football is probably different, but in basketball, it was very different. What you did, you had to kind of do on your own, and the nutritional part of it, obviously, we didn't have some of that knowledge, and just different ways you can improve your bodies and take care of your bodies and recovery and all these things that we know now that we didn't. So there's no question that the athletes are more athletic today. Now, again, I argue, you'll hear people say, well, Bill Russell would have had a hard time in today's NBA, or Oscar Robertson. Well, no, they wouldn't have, because they'd have been doing the same things these guys are doing. They'd have been working out. They'd have looked different physically too.
Right.
So again, I think just from that, people are more athletic. And I don't know where you're going with it next, but the interesting part of it, Shayne, is the argument is, are they more skilled? And I think that's where you always get that athleticism versus skill argument a little bit.
Well, with the skill, there's extremely skilled players in today's time. I think when you look at the advanced little league, we talked about that on a couple shows ago. And again, all these shows, you can go back there on your podcast app and check it out, or if you're with us on YouTube, just scroll down and look for all the different shows. But on our little league show, we talked about the advancement. I think it's done wonders for some of the most elite athletes in terms of accelerating the program. AAU, there's different exposure events, there's different things out there. The elite player is elite. What I do see in skill development, Matt, is the lack of skill, in my opinion, comes from the depth down through the rosters. Okay, so when I watch every level of basketball, I don't feel like the third and fourth and fifth and sixth players, in my opinion, are as skilled as they used to be. They don't handle the ball as well. Their feet aren't as good. A lot of times in baseball, it's kind of that athleticism. You're kind of going with athleticism. You're trying to teach them on the run, but a lot of that feel for the game and the different things in baseball. I see it a little bit in every sport. So my point is, I'm not sure why that is. It's because we used to go to so many more camps. There used to be more camp days, where nowadays it's more play. But I just feel like, in terms of the skill level, that I don't see the depth of skill when I watch the games across the board. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it is. I think like you said it very well. Your best players are the best players in every generation, and
Right.
and their
they
game,
could play in any generation.
Yes, yeah. I think that the skill level is probably. I don't think there's as big a gap as what a lot of people say, but I do think there's some gap. I think for a couple of reasons. One, I think that the athletic part of things is taken over to where kids work more on their bodies and on their athleticism than they do their skills sometimes.
Yes.
They'll go and say, hey, I'm working out at a place that is teaching me to do explosions and increasing my speed and my vertical and my strength and all these things that are going to help me, which is great. But they're not spending the same amount of time in the driveway with a basketball in their hand, just working on their skill. They're not spending the same amount of time just with one or two other people throwing a baseball, or taking grounders, or shagging fly balls. I mean, whatever your sport is, Shayne, the lack of, we talked about this in another episode, the lack of that unstructured play, where you just a bunch of friends get together and play, which I think increased skill, because it was usually like 2-on-2, 3-on-3, where your skill level. Now what's happened is, these kids grow up in a environment where they play a lot of games, and we talked about this in one of our episodes too, where we talked about games.
When you're talking about Ghostbed.
Yeah. Well,
you're talking about creative play. You're talking about just being
but we
able
also talked in that episode, if you remember, about games versus practices, how we're playing more games than we are practices. And I think that's the society they grow up in is, hey, you start playing little league baseball or youth basketball or whatever, you practice once a week and you play a game once a week, or you practice once and you play 2 games a week. And all of a sudden, you're not really working on the skills as much as you're just playing. And you're not getting to play in an unstructured environment. You're playing in this game where the best player is doing most of the work and everybody else is just sort of watching, which supports your point, right? The best player's doing all the work at a young age. He becomes elite. He does okay, but there's no depth. You're not developing any other, teammates really, and it's causing the skill level as a whole to go down.
Well, and here that kind of ties into a little bit of two other topics I want to touch on. One, IQ, and then I want to transition it over into competitiveness, because I think what happens, Matt, is with the IQ, yes, we grew up in a time where we would watch more sports on TV. When we had the opportunity to watch it, it wasn't like it was on all the time, so we really invested in a whole game. It wasn't
Right.
a day of Sports Center where you just catch your highlights. You know what I mean? You'd sit down and watch an entire game, and you'd learn a lot from listening to the announcers. Or as TV started to grow and there was more and more games on, every sport, you had the opportunity to watch more and more, and you started to learn from that. But I also think with like IQ, it transitions over to competitive, because as you were learning the game, you were forced to play the game in a more fun environment. In terms of, I think today we're a little bit guilty of, we have all these coaching days and we have all these different things, Matt. In my opinion, sometimes we make kids almost so robotic. Everything is so structured that we're playing, and they never get a chance just to roll the ball out and play, is what I say. Like I know a lot of really good basketball coaches on the girls side and the boys side at the high school level, where open gym drives them nuts. Drives them
Right.
nuts.
Right.
They can't stand it. There's got to be more structure to it. They got to be more this, more that. And I'll kind of laugh and I'll say, I think it's healthy. Look out there. You have multiple people. All of a sudden now, certain kids, and I didn't say goof off, you know what I mean, but I'm saying certain kids have the freedom to try to put the ball on the floor and make a little bit more of a creative play. Or in soccer, maybe they have an opportunity to take the ball in an open field and do some things that maybe a coach wouldn't want them doing when score counts.
Right.
And you start to learn, and then you see the competitive juices start, because what's the score? No, it's 6-5. No, it's 7-5. I made this shot, and all of a sudden it makes them invest a little bit more in what's happening in the game. And you ever remember an hour and a half open gym growing up where there wasn't an argument about what the score is,
Oh
or
no.
different
Yeah.
things, because you had to win to stay. It wasn't
Right.
sit one, you know what I mean? It was, we've got next. And then when you were lucky enough to walk on, you would win if you wanted to play again. If not, you might go sit down for a half hour again before you get back on. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it was a competitive drive, where I question a little bit more in this real structure time of where we're playing in our team camps and different things like that. Or even more so when they go into the AAU, the club volleyball, the different things. That's very important to some, but I don't know if the investment of winning and losing is there the same. It is with some, for sure, but I don't know when they're playing those 3-4 games in a day. Is you think that's where some of the competitive juices maybe have gone away? I just don't see that school pride and that investment in terms of kids being maybe as competitive and as attached to the end result of winning and losing maybe they were in our generation.
Yeah, you hit on two things there. First, let me make a comment about the IQ of our
Yes,
athletes
because I
now.
combined IQ and competitiveness on
Right,
both.
in terms of their not sports understanding. Um, I don't know that I don't know if I would say that it's terribly worse than it was during our time. Although I'll say this, because of the lack of unstructured play and like you mentioned, the lack of watching sports on TV, I do think kids grow up and maybe their understanding of the games come a little later, where maybe it came a little earlier. Like I'll see in Little League baseball right now. I help coach an eight and under team. I'd say half the kids don't understand completely about tagging up, for instance, on a ball, a fly ball plus 2 outs. I don't know. Maybe I didn't either at that age. I can't remember. I just know from watching baseball on TV or whatever, you learn those things, or playing out in the yard, you sort of learn those things. And I think some of those things aren't being learned. Now, by the time you get to high school, it probably evens out, I guess, and most of the kids know what they need to know at least. The competitive thing's very interesting, though. I don't want to repeat some of the things you said, although I do agree with your AAU comment about, and I agree with, I had to smile when you talked about you get beat and you have to sit 2 games. I remember going down to City Park and you're like, you get beat. And it's like, this sucks, man. I'm going to be here 40 minutes before I can play again.
Before you get back on the court, right?
And then if you get beat again, you're there for another. I mean, all of a sudden you're there for 2 hours. You play 2 games because you didn't win, you know. And I do think for whatever reason, I said this earlier, kids want to win. They want to be successful. There's no doubt about that. I think losing hurts this generation a little less than it did us or generations before. I don't think winning is any less joyful. I don't. But I think losing hurts a little less. I think kids get over it quicker and move on. And maybe that's a good thing. Okay, I don't know. But I think it's partly because of the society they've grew up in terms of, like you said, if you lose, just move on to the next one. I was watching my son play a video game the other day. He goes, "Hey, Dad, watch me play this game." I can't even tell you what it is. I don't remember. But he got killed, and I was like, "Oh, that sucks, man. What happens now?" "Oh, well, you just respawn, man, and you just go on with it." "Oh, okay. Well, hey, who cares then, right? I got killed. Just move right on." You know, at least like, you know, you'd think you'd have to go back a level or something. I don't know. But I mean, it's and the other thing, Shayne, is, and let me ask you if you think this affects competitiveness today. The kids, and again, some people would say this is good. Kids are being raised now in our schools, especially, and in a lot of our homes to be nice, right? Hey, whoa. Be nice. Don't do that. Don't, like, being a ruthless competitor is almost frowned upon now, isn't it? A little bit, like, you know, and it's like, I get the whole, again, okay, take bullying, for instance. Let's just throw that word out there. We hear that a lot, right? You take a serious issue like that needed to be dealt with, but now what we've done is everything's bullying, right? We've taken it and it's like, what used to be busting your chops, having some fun with you is now bullying. What used to be a coach getting in your face, yelling at you, or smacking you on the backside real hard, well, that's ridiculous. That's bullying now. You know, so I don't know. I mean, again, we do this in our society a lot. We take an issue that's crucial and very important, and we lose sight of what we're supposed to be looking at because it branches off into a million other things. But I think sometimes we're almost not allowing young kids to be competitive.
Right. That's true. I think that, and I've said this on some previous shows. I think without question, sportsmanship is better in today's time than it ever was when we were playing, for sure.
And that's great. There's no question.
That's great. I think the part of the competitive juices that bother me a little bit is, and I see it a little bit academically with the middle school kids and then into their sports. I see it in high school, in terms of the different things. You even see it with adults as you start to get into the job place and the marriages and different things. I think the ability to quit becomes easier. You know what I'm saying? I think that drive and that relentlessness. On that same point, Matt, I kind of had another link here. I wondered, do you feel like the structure in terms of the way high school sports go now in terms of June, like right now in June, I know we're in a weird situation. I guess the calendar turned July now, but think of a normal June for me throughout your career.
Right.
If you are a 2 and 3 sport athlete, how much your basketball coach wants out of you, how much your volleyball coach wants out of you, or a football coach, or if you're trying to play some summer baseball, if not, or you get some baseball, softball work in, what it might be. Maybe you're a soccer player, whatever it is. Do you think some of the different structure and some of those different things, though, kind of turn it more into a job, and again, you lose some of that opportunity for kids to go out and play freelance or whatever it might be, in terms of a lack of a better term? Because I guess what I'm saying is, the point I made earlier about it's not necessarily the skill or the IQ or the different things. I don't see as much of a creativity in the way kids play. You see what I'm saying? I think we've made so much of a robotic system out of these particular kids that I think sometimes it takes away maybe the joy and the different, ability to play. I can remember sometimes our coaches were so demanding, man, it was nice to kind of get to that one spot to where we could go play in the open gym setting, or we could just go play out in the driveway, the 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And I guess the reason I tie those things together is because when it comes to toughness, when it comes to sports IQ, when it comes to, learning how to play in different environments and with different people and so forth, that's where so much of that has come from. So even though in the new school, we have opportunities to certainly put coaches with kids more, and I think there's a lot of positives there. You talked last week about, why are there limitations? I do think there was something to be said in terms of the old school, in terms of how much we had to create those opportunities to play and to kind of, the term I always use is kind of figure it out.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it goes back to a little bit of the parenting thing we talked about, where if we're not careful, we try so hard to do so much for our kids, we don't let them figure it out. We don't give them that opportunity, you know what I mean, to sort of work through things themselves.
do you think we've, and maybe I didn't ask the question there at the end that I was wanting to drive the point. Do you think everything we've talked about is to blame for the lack of the three-sport athlete in today's time compared to
Well,
when
yeah,
we were growing
no,
up?
right. I kind of thought that was where you were going toward, was with the three-sport athlete. I think that has a part in it. It's interesting to me, like, I think this three-sport athlete today, if you look at it, I wonder. I don't have data on this to show you how many less three-sport athletes there are nowadays. There does seem to me to be less of them. You and I coach at two different situations, because you're at a small school and I'm at not a huge school, but a larger school than you for sure. Okay. One thing I've noticed, and I've been at both. So I coached at a school when I first started that was really tiny, a little small school.
Right.
And there you had a lot of three-sport athletes because you had to survive, and it was sort of like, but you didn't have to be real good to be a three-sport athlete. Like, you didn't have to be real talented to make all three teams.
But you had to want to play.
You just had to want to play. The problem is at the bigger schools is, even if you want to play, you got to be pretty good, because what's happening is kids are specializing in a sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to play all three of them, unless you're just a fantastic athlete, you have to be willing to be a teammate and a role player maybe, and not the main guy in every single sport that you play, because there's going to be certain kids that specialize. So then what happens is, well, I'm okay at that sport and I'm okay at that sport, but I think if I put all my time into this sport, I might be one of the best on the team. And you'll see kids doing that. So don't you think kids are specializing at a younger age because they see that they have a higher level of talent at that sport? I'm better at that. Because let's face it, if when you're 10 years old, if you're the best player on your baseball team, that feels good, doesn't it? Like, man, I'm the best player on my team. I went and played basketball. I was like the fourth best player. I'm going to let that sport go. I'm going to keep playing baseball where I'm the best, because it feels good to be the best. So a lot of times then kids start to specialize, even sometimes parents, because the thing of it is, in today's society too, in defense of parents though, if your kid's going to be a multi-sport athlete, you are going to be running all over the place. I mean, it never stops. Like, I've made a commitment to my younger son, who seems to be somewhat interested in sports, to offer him opportunities in all the sports and not at all push him toward one. And because of that, he's sort of okay at all of them. He's not great at any of them right now, but that's okay with me. Okay. I just want to present opportunities. Now, to do that, here's what our week looked like, though. Hey, we got baseball practice on Thursday night. We got a couple games a week. And then, hey, we're going to go to golf junior lessons on this day. And then we got to get out in the yard. I want to get shooting in at least a couple times a week, because I want you to shoot some basketball and be a part of that too. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's taken up your whole week. And so that's a commitment that parents have to be willing to make. Some parents can't make that commitment, maybe due to their job situation or whatever. So you have a whole lot of dynamics working here against the three-sport athlete today that maybe you didn't back then, because I think back in the day, if you wanted to play football, basketball, baseball, let's say, wouldn't you agree you were almost able just to play them during the season? I mean, your off-season commitment was minimal. Hey,
well, your off-season commitment, again, it's a rules thing, which takes you back to last week's show. It's a rules thing. I mean, we grew up in a time, Matt, where you couldn't have more than two people on a Gus Macker team. You know what I'm saying? Where nowadays you not only have 10 coaching days, which if you utilize open gyms or whatever, turns into about 40 coaching days, and it's a situation where, there's a lot more of a commitment. I've had parent after parent after parent tell me, when I ask them about the three-sport athlete, they'll say, you can be a 2-sport athlete in a day. You can't really do 3 if you're going to be pretty good at them. That's just kind of the way the culture kind of says. So again, there may be some truth to that. Obviously, I see some kids, and again, it's usually at the smaller school, and it's usually some of your elite athletes, which this leads transitions perfect into athleticism. I want to circle back to that because there's something that has been on my mind here as they've started to go into the NBA bubble in Orlando, and like I said, with some of the pitching and some of the baseball guys getting ready to go here in the month of July. It's this term load management you hear quite a bit. As I started to look back through, I just wanted to read you a couple things here in some of my research. I went back into late 60s all the way through the mid 80s. Steve Carlton, great pitcher in Major League Baseball, came up with the Cardinals, probably better known to most of our generation with the Phillies. Steve Carlton basically threw in 1972 at the age of 27 threw 346 innings, struck out 310 guys. Okay, even in 1980, still at the age of 35, threw 304 innings. So you start to go ahead kind of somewhat of a generation. You get more into Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux, over a 16-year period, threw 200 plus innings 15 times. And that other year, he threw 199 in the third. So basically 16 straight years through 200 or more innings throughout. And you say, well, okay, maybe he wasn't a power pitcher. So I went to, Randy Johnson, came up with Seattle, Arizona, had a lot of stops, but was phenomenal. 14 times in his career. He threw like over 4,000 innings in his career, 14 times threw over 200 innings. Obviously he was. So now when I go into today's time, your Justin Verlander might still throw like a 223, but you don't even have to hardly get out of the top 15 in innings pitched, Matt, to get under 200 innings a year. And I start to see the athletes. So as I go sport to sport, Michael Jordan, 78 or more games, 12 times. Even in his Washington days, he played all 82 games. He's playing high 30, low 40 minutes. Karl Malone, take a look at this. 18 years in Utah, 17 of those 18 years, he played 80 or more games. Where now, Kawhi Leonard's 28 years old, hasn't played over 74 games in a basketball season. It's one of these things in terms of, I'm not talking about guys that are hurt or different things. I'm talking about people looking at a schedule and saying, that's too much. That's too much. That's too much. And I see this a little bit in today's time. I'll see people tell me that, hey, I can go play in this AAU tournament. I can go play in this club volleyball tournament. I can play for 2-3 hours or whatever. But if I have a football workout from 10 to 11:30, and then the basketball coach wants me to go open gym 11:30 to 1, that's a lot. That's a lot to ask of an athlete. And so don't you feel like this falls into that category from earlier that you were talking about in terms of we've taken something, okay, we may be more open-minded to it, but we've probably taken it to the extreme. We're talking about 16-year-old kids. I think we talked about this last week in terms of finally letting kids play 6 quarters of basketball in a night, or letting kids play up to that 32, 33 games of baseball if it's JV varsity split. Or whatnot. Do you see where I'm getting with that? As I read generation to generation, I feel like, I don't know, is it unfair to say in a way we're babying the athlete? We have these people that are supposed to be more athletic, and we agree on that, yet we're asking them to do less. I almost feel like I don't know that we're limiting injuries any more than we're causing them.
No, I agree. I think that we have bigger, faster, stronger athletes who work harder on their bodies now more than ever. And then we turn around and say, well, wait a minute here. We need to give them days off, or we need to give them time off. Can you overdo it? Sure. Sure. Obviously in anything, but what I'm saying is yeah, you have to ask yourself to an extent, like take pitching. Are the arm injuries caused by overuse, or is it because we've backed people off so much? I remember you said you listened to Leo Mazzoni once, right? Talk at a clinic about how when he was the pitching coach for Smoltz and Avery and Glavine and Maddox and that ridiculous pitching staff, they never had injuries. Why? Because they threw.
He'd always tell the high school coach, Johnny doesn't have a rubber arm because he can throw every day. Johnny has a rubber arm because he does throw every day.
Yeah.
He's saying that there's something in that training that takes place.
And again, I think it's a little bit of a generational thing too, where again, kids kind of, I don't know, and I'm talking before our generation. Go back to our parents' generation, all right?
Mm-hmm.
When kids had to walk to school, or you were expected to work, 6 hours a day in the yard with your parents or whatever. Right
Right.
now, my son preaches load management all the time because he could only mow the backyard yesterday, and he couldn't weed eat because that was
Yeah,
going too far.
go
I mow, but
overdo it. Right.
yeah, we gotta work our way up. But yeah, so I think just generationally, kids have had to do less and less and less physical work, so I think that's filtered over into it a little bit. Now again, knowledge is a great thing, the medical knowledge we get, and hey, we don't want to do this or we can do this, but again, I think we take it too far sometimes, for sure. I just like take football for instance, the knowledge of heat stroke stuff, and understanding the hydration. That's
Right.
been great, right? Because
Absolutely.
we needed that. I mean, you had kids dying, you had kids on the verge of heat strokes all the time. Now we understand more. So that's one area where you do have to back off, right? But what you're talking
Yes.
about of, hey, I had to go to an hour and a half weightlifting for football today in an air conditioning weight room, and now we're being asked to go over here and get a shooting workout in an air conditioned gym.
Yeah.
But man, I can't do that because I need. No, see, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that at all. And I think again, the adults have unfortunately trained some of the athletes to think that way a little bit.
Well, that's interesting. And Matt, I'll tell you what, I have one more on my list here before we get to the final thoughts. And that has to do with the media, the entertainment. I guess you'd have to tie in social media here. And here's some of my early thoughts on this. I think that a lot of the personalities of maybe not taking criticism as well, or the different things, is how public and how everybody's kind of knows everybody's business in today's
Right.
time compared. It used to be one of those where you say, and you still try to do this, but let's face it, it's harder. You still try to say, let's handle this in-house. Let's keep this
Right.
inside our basketball family or our baseball family or our football family. Um, but it seems like everybody's accomplishments, or everybody's falling short of accomplishment in terms of where they finish, or what happened, or if something breaks out, or if there was some controversy or different things. Let's face it, it's all over social media now, so
Right.
everybody knows a little bit more of everything. I feel like that adds a little bit more to the pressure of our culture in terms of our egos. um, I also see social media as being a platform where people can sometimes stroke that ego, in terms of, I see that. But all in all, I see the entertainment value as causing a little bit more pressure in terms of, you've always had rules to follow, but I guess maybe the hardest rule book to stay clear of is that public opinion, right? It's that, what is the public going to think of the way this person acted, or what this person said, or they take part of what they said and they kind of twist it to make it kind of a story that they can run with, and so forth. So that used to be something that maybe only happened at the higher levels. I think now in today's generation, social media has brought this well down into the high school, because let's face it, your athletes are on there inside these discussions and so forth. So to me, Matt, the social media has added a whole different level of media pressure that is very instant. It's very, you don't have to wait till the next morning to go out in the driveway and get the newspaper, right? If
Right.
it happened in the fourth quarter of a game tonight, people know before you even get to your car, no matter what gym you're in or no matter what field you're at. So um, what role do you think the social media plays in terms of the old school to new school, in terms of the toughness and the handling of situations that we've talked about?
I think you kind of nailed that. I think honestly, a lot of the stuff we talked about tonight, whether it be the way kids are parented, or the way we handle things at schools, in our schools, or even sometime the leadership techniques and approaches of coaches, are affected heavily by social media, for sure. You know, I used the example earlier, if you remember, of the parents doing the projects for their kids, right? Well,
Right.
part of that is because there's going to be a picture on Facebook that says, "Hey, look at Julie's,
Yeah.
Halloween
Got a
pumpkin she
got a
made today."
superior. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then, you got, Susan's parents like, son of a gun, I got to, next time, my God,
right.
we're going to get a superior and I'm going to put it on Facebook.
Yeah.
So you have that. Unfortunately, what it does is it causes the comparison game. And I heard a leader one time say, to live in the world of comparison steals your joy. You're never going to be happy if you're constantly just comparing yourself to somebody else instead of trying to be the best version of yourself. But so I think that the social media for sure does that. Now there's positives to it too. And I think that, because you mentioned some of them, the ability to see kids play, the ability to promote yourself if you are an elite athlete, trying to go to the next level. I mean, I can remember being in high school and sending out VHS tapes to colleges, in hopes that somebody might stick one in their VCR and watch it for a few minutes, and now the ability to be able to get yourself out there if you are that type of athlete, right? The ability for grandma who's too old to go to the game to be able to sit at her house and see you play on film, or somebody stream it on Facebook Live. I mean, those are the positives that sometimes don't get talked about with social media and media. So, you take the good with the bad a little bit, I guess, on that. But it definitely, to say it doesn't play a role, I think it plays a huge role. Social media, especially.
Well, Matt, that's basically all I had in terms of our topics. I think on down through the line. I'll certainly give you a chance. I was going to go ahead and start in with some final thoughts, and I guess I wanted to look at this in terms of when we compare old school to new school, it doesn't need to be a negative. It doesn't need to be
Right.
a this time versus this time. It needs to be a learning opportunity and a very fun dynamic that takes, all right, here's the way we used to do this. And as I hear you say all the time, okay, what was good about that? Man, we need to kind of get back to that. That was good. That can still work. Or
Right.
what, outdated, we need to get rid of that. Why are we still doing that? Compared to this new time of, okay, hey, here's all these things that are available to us. Just because they're available to us may not mean they're good. We need to make sure that we're making sure, okay, what's it for? Okay, how are we using it? Okay, is it successful? Good. So I think on both sides, we do this as sports fans all the time, Matt. You can't get on social media at all. You can't talk to anybody from different time periods in terms of LeBron versus Jordan, right?
Right.
And and you'll get people doing those things all the time, and those things are fun. You'll get the stories of, oh, well, back in the day we walked to school, or then and the
Right.
next generation, back in the day we had to stop and use the payphone. We didn't have so all of these different things, and they're fun. But it's, I would caution and encourage, maybe is the better word, leaders to always take time to compare the old and the new. And again, make sure you're pulling the best from both to make sure that you're using the resources and using them in a way that move you into a positive direction. So I think from safety to technology to all of those things, there's a lot of positives. There's things we have to do, but we don't have to use it just because it's the new window dressing. You know what I mean? It has to still have a purpose. It still has to be for success. There has to be a reason that we think, hey, this is better than we used to do it. And then if it is, we should do it. But if not, sometimes we don't have to reinvent it when it's already successful. So I think there's a real, just like so many final thoughts here on expanding the zone, this is always really good leadership, professional development for me, because what it reminds me of is I need to be very open-minded. I need to educate myself past and present and look ahead to the future. And I think that's where the best answers lie. So I didn't want to cut you off there. If you had something else, if you did, please throw that at me. If not, go ahead and kind of give us your final thought.
Yeah, I want to do something here kind of different in just a second with my final thoughts, but I do think you're right about when you're looking at old school versus new school, you tend to, I think, naturally gravitate toward your generation.
Sure.
I think it's hard not to. It's like that in everything. Like my wife will make fun of me because all of a sudden I'll binge watch Different Strokes on Netflix or something because it reminds me of a day and age that I
Right.
remember fondly, right? It reminds
Yeah.
me of my childhood, which for me was my childhood was a good childhood. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed
Mhm.
growing up. So, or the music we listened to, oh, I'm listening to 80s on Sirius XM because that's, the generation you grew up in. You get it with debates, right? If you ask it, most people in our generation are going to tell you Michael Jordan's the best player ever to play.
Right.
You get 15 years younger than us and it's LeBron. You go 20 years older than us, it's Bill Russell. And I'll tell you what,
Right.
did you ever see Bob Cousy handle the ball? I mean, it doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
You tend to gravitate toward your generation. So when we were doing this show, one of the things I was concerned with, Shayne, was like, I hope when we're done with this, we don't look back and think, man, we just sort of said old school was better than new school in almost every single way, And I don't think we've done this, but as a review, I want to put you on the spot here, okay? I'm going to go down through a few of these that we listed. I want you to tell me, you got to tell me that you'll take old, you'll take new, or it's a push. Okay. Now we went through a lot of these things, so I'll just jump around here. Competitiveness of the athlete. If you had to choose one, would you take the competitiveness of the old school athlete or today's?
I'll take the old.
Okay, I would agree with that. Athleticism. But
New.
today, yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think kids are definitely more athletic today. How
I don't go, I very rarely, for every 10 point guards I watch, for example, I sit there and I'm amazed, like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine being that quick or that athletic. Yeah.
physical toughness. Now, here's what I mean by this. So consider this: the the overall physical toughness of an athlete, but I also want you to weigh in the 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 way we handle things medically now too. So the
I would
advancements, the
say,
knowledge, all
I would
those
say
things.
push, because I would say on the surface that it might look like the old school's tougher, but I think you nailed it, Matt. I think you just said that really, really well in summary. I think today's kids are tied in terms of, so many, even the smallest schools have a trainer right there on site. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's one of those things where sometimes you're simply told you're not going back in, or you're
Yeah, a
not going.
lot of times it's
So I
not the
think that's a
athlete.
push. Yes.
Yeah, it's not the athlete shutting themselves down. They're being shut down.
Right.
I've had kids before want to play, and they say, "Hey, we can't let you go back in," or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I can't disagree with that. Push. I would even tend to maybe edge toward the new on that a little bit, but I could definitely go with a push on that. The mental toughness of athletes, old or new.
Again, culture and society plays a big role. I don't know that I think kids have had to change some because of that. I think coaches have had to change some of that. That one's probably, I've been really confident on every answer so far. You probably stumped me there a little bit. So the fact that I'm struggling, Matt, I guess I'd have to say push.
Yeah, I would probably tend to go old school on this a little bit, but I don't blame the athlete as much as
Do you
I
see the
blame.
comparison to the medical here in terms of, I do think old right off the top of my head, but I also think of, things such as the social media and the cultural, what's
Right.
accepting and so forth.
Well,
That's
you
what I
mentioned
really
it
feel.
earlier. Take the sportsmanship, right? And maybe
Yes.
this would go maybe this would go more with the competitiveness, but like we agree that the sportsmanship is better now than it used to be. We probably treat each other better than especially kids from opposing schools. So, there's certain parts of the way that the adults are bringing these kids up are good and improved.
Hmm.
There are certain parts that maybe cause for some mental weakness too. So that is a tough one. Push may be the best you can do there. Skill level across the board in different sports.
I think the depth of skill. I think the depth of skill is better in the old. I think because of the athleticism, I think it's evened out in a different type of way. But if you're going to break it down to just skill, if you're going to break it down to just free throw percentage and 3-point percentage and the
Yeah,
ability to bunt and the ability to field the ground ball or the
right.
ability to run a route or the ability to have proper hitting technique or to move in position to pass the volleyball, I think skill development is lacking in today's time. I think it's probably a little bit more old. Where I would be willing to make it as a push is if you were talking about the athleticism offsetting that skill, because as we said earlier, I can't
Right.
argue bigger, faster, stronger, but just skill, I would go older.
Yeah, I would tend to agree because I think the elite's a push. When you argue LeBron versus Jordan, it's a tough argument. The argument's a little easier when you talk supporting cast versus supporting cast back then.
Right.
In different sports. So I kind of agree with that. An interesting one here: leadership. Okay, so let's just take coaching, and since we do a sports show, obviously, but the leadership are leaders today. Are they better than leaders of yesteryear? And I know that's a tough question, okay, and maybe in some ways even unfair, but like, who do you give the nod to? Are leadership styles today versus leadership styles of back then?
Because it's so tight, for my tiebreaker would be this. I would probably tend to go toward our leaders of today for this reason, because they're leading in a more difficult time as time moves
Yes.
forward.
Yep.
We said earlier, a lot of times when we were growing up, a teacher, a principal, a coach could just basically tell you, hey, we're doing it this way because I said so.
Right.
And the commitment at home and from parenting and from different things, when I hear stories of like our parents tell us about discipline things, it's almost funny, right? And then I
Right.
think back to times we were growing up as a little bit looser. Today it's even looser. I mean, as we go through. So I think we've had great leaders in the history, obviously, but I think today's leaders, even though they have more resources, even though they have more things to learn from, more things to look at, more data to
Right.
gather, more information available to them, I still think they are leading in a time where every decision is not only dissected the way it always was, it's being dissected immediately. And in today's time with social media, everybody has a voice, right? It's
Yes.
not just certain people have the typewriter in front of them to put it in print. Everybody has the opportunity on a phone or a computer just to give their opinion immediately, no matter how educated or a lack thereof. So I think that's probably, in terms of pressure and in terms of what they're handling, even though they have more resources to do it, I'd probably tend to go to the new leadership in terms of being a little bit more difficult and being a little bit more dynamic because of that.
I agree. I would go new because it's just a tougher job now. And I don't want to offend any coaches from the
No.
past, but it's just a tougher job. It's a tougher job because you have to fight harder as a coach now to earn respect and compliance from your athletes, because before they did it because they were told to do it. Now
Now,
they
I will say there used to be more commitment or a little bit more loyalty. So a little bit more of that longevity, you know what I'm saying, in terms of
right.
leadership and play. I think there's more turnover now,
Sure.
due to a lot of different
But
factors.
I think that's partly due to what you're talking about. It's a tougher
Yeah,
job in a lot
tougher
of ways.
job.
There's more pressure. There's more things going on, and the advantage we have is more information to educate ourselves. I mean,
Mhm.
the amount of reading I do, the podcast I listen to, all these things
Right.
help me as a leader grow and be better. But I have to do that because we coach in such a complex situation now.
Mhm.
Couple more here, and we'll get out of here. But like three sport athlete, let me put it to you this way: would you prefer more kids being average or just solid, let's say, and play all three sports, or are you happier with kids diving in and being absolutely great at one sport and really focusing? Which way? Because that's really old and new, right? New is the more specializing. Old is the more three sport athletes. Which do you like better?
This is probably a push here, because I guess all I ask is kids stay active and kids work hard and have great attitudes and so forth. So in today's time, if your idea of I'm going to play baseball, I'm going to play summer baseball, I'm going to play fall ball, I'm going to go hitting instructor, I'm going to go to a workout guy, whatever it is. If it's volleyball and you're going to play for your school and then play with your school in the summer and go play club volleyball and again do workout stuff or what, that's fine. I guess my personal preference is because I am so connected to schools. I mean, think about it. I've grown up as an athlete and then as a coach, and then I do SVCSportZone.com where I cover our league and our local athletes now for over a decade. I probably prefer the 3-sport athlete, but it's very unfair of me to answer it in that way. I prefer that because I'm all about the school pride. I'm all about, play for your school, do this, do that. But to say that kids are doing something wrong when they specialize in that way, as long as they're staying active and doing that, I understand there's more opportunity today than there was 20 years ago. So that would make me very dated to say that. So I guess to be objective, I would say push. If I were going to be a little bit more subjective, I love the 3-sport athlete, though, in terms of representing your school.
Yeah, I like the push here as long as that kid who's specializing is truly working hard at
Yes.
that one sport.
Sometimes it's a cop out. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
hey, I'm not going to play this
I'm
because
going
I'm
to
going to
focus on
focus on this.
football, so I'm
Right.
not going to play baseball. I'm going to get in the weight room and get strong. And then the kid sits around eating chips all spring, and he could have played
Right.
baseball.
But if they're really doing that and they're really going out,
Right?
then who am I to say not? Yeah.
Sure, exactly. Real quick, IQ players smarter now or players smarter back then?
I think that it's probably a push by the time we get to the high school level. I
Right.
think what happens is I think it was a much more natural, self-taught thing. That's not to say we didn't have great coaches, but I'm saying you're forced to teach yourself and to do things. But today's time, man, you have more coaching. So
Yeah.
I would probably lean to the new, maybe make it a push, because you have more coaching. It's more year round. You have more film study. Like back then, we watched a lot of film, but like
Right.
you said, it wasn't the easiest thing to rewind, fast forward, find your spots, whatever. Where nowadays in huddle, people are watching it, individually more and so forth.
Right.
So I think today lends more opportunity, but for some reason I don't always see that IQ being higher, maybe in comparison to what it used to be. So I would probably say push.
Yeah, I mean, at the high school level, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. High school or above, once you get to a certain level,
That's a
I
fair point.
I
Yeah.
do think for sure at the little league level, I would
Far
go
more
old.
advanced. You're
Yeah,
you're you're right in terms of far more advanced than the old times in terms of them
yeah,
having the
because they
figure it
just
out.
learned them earlier. Last thing here, one more, and we'll just tie this in with we talked about media a little bit. So let's just talk. I want to talk entertainment a minute. We didn't really specifically say entertainment earlier in the show, but let's look at it this way. Sports have become way more entertainment driven. I don't think anybody would argue that. I mean, at every single level. Obviously, professional levels, you go to a baseball park, I guarantee you, Great American Ballpark has got 100 different things more for entertainment than Crosley Field had, okay? It's just the way it is. But it's come down to the high school levels too, right? We have to constantly, we could do this, we could add this at halftime, we could do this before a game, our scoreboard, we could do a video board, we could do stats on our scoreboard or whatever. I mean, there's constantly things for the fans, right? Make it more entertainment driven. Do you like that, or would you like to go back to, hey, we're just going to play the game, we're going to wait for the newspaper to come out tomorrow to get the score and the stats. We're not going to have the social media. We're not going to have everything at our fingertips. Entertainment or less entertainment, I guess.
I probably lend more to the entertainment. I'm fine by that. I think it's something I've tried to embrace in coaching. I've tried to understand that it's there. But also, Matt, I'm not only a coach, I'm a big time fan. It's one of those
Yeah.
things, man. Without sports here, I'm to the point where, the last 4 weeks, even today as we record right now, it's set in there in the other room. Rocket Mortgage. I'll sit there and watch every shot. I'm starving for, in Detroit
Right.
there, the PGA. I'm just starving for sports. So, I think as a fan experience, getting different things. Can it take away from the game itself? Absolutely. But if it draws more people to our game, is that a good thing? Yeah,
Right.
kind of. So
Right.
I'll be honest, the way I handle it in coaching all the time is instead of trying to run away from stats, I embrace them. I try to explain to people, look, you're going to have a batting average. You're going to have an RBI total. You're going to have a
Right.
strikeout total. You're going to have an ERA. And it's one of those things where you never put that in front of the team, but it's okay to have individual goals. And then you should be a great teammate and you should be happy. You know what I mean? Like if your buddy was 3 for 3 tonight and you were 0 for 3, but you can't be happy for your buddy, it kind of makes you an idiot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of those things of,
Certainly a bad teammate.
right. That's what I mean.
Right.
Like, and so I kind of try to embrace those things. I certainly understand the other side of it, but I just think there's way too many positives to get wrapped up in the distractions or the different things that it may cause.
So, in conclusion, with my final thoughts, before people say, "Hey, those Combs guys, man, they're old school, and they were just going to come on here and tell us to get off their lawn," we had 3 olds, 3 news, and a couple pushes there. So
Right.
I thought, in all honesty, I think that it goes to show you there's some things that we probably could take from the past and maybe revisit and use, but there's a lot of things that have been good going forward. The good old days aren't necessarily all good, right? And but yet there's some things we could probably take from them too. So those are my final thoughts, Shayne.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I didn't realize you were going to do that at the end. I thought it was a great touch. I really enjoyed that, and I do think it's a great way to cap the show. So we're not going to waste any time adding anything to that. I think that tells the story as good as any. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let us know. Look us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Just follow SBC Sports Zone is what you want to look for. On YouTube, SBC Sports Zone Shayne. Email admin1@sbcsportzone.com. So again, reach out to us. Very thankful for some of the kind comments and some of the messages I get each week. And we'll be back at it again next week. So until then, for my brother Matt, I'm Shayne Combs. We appreciate you watching Expanding the Zone. Talk to you next week.